Thank you.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Brunch, Sunday Brunch with Sensie. And here it is, September 4th, I think. And many things have occurred. Uncle Joe gave his little speech. And, so many people I talk to are so stuck to whatever they believe. Right? They don't have any free will or any faith in co-creation. And a good example of that faith is back in the day when I was in New York. And after we went to the moon in 1969, 1970, when Dick got to be president, he got put there. There isn't a single president who wasn't put there, right? Not a single president represents the people. Period. Period. They represent the corporate structure, Basically, within the corporate structure, there are competing groups, but overall, it's Hail Hydra, right? And there is no such thing as a good war, like the Civil War. How about, the Revolutionary War? That was a good war. Revolutionary War, who made out, Well, the founding fathers made out because it was all about them, white, landed, gentry, rich men. And the Constitution was all about them. It protected them. It didn't protect the average man. And 1/3 of the American population at the time didn't want to go to war. They felt they were English. They had all these wars with the French. It's so. What was this all about? It was about King George not really wanting to put the bill anymore, right? So he wanted to, at the very least, put a central bank run by him in the United States. And the first thing he used admiralty law to do that. And so the first thing that everyone kind of used was G. So it was a tax house. And so that's why, everybody got upset about it. Because it was the first motif, the first stage, the first thing to centralize back. Because pretty much each of those states or political areas, New York, Massachusetts, Maine, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, like those other countries. They had their own money. Right? They had exchanges, and that's what the New York Stock Exchange was, basically. And, the first president we ever had was sworn in on the steps of the New York Stock Exchange. And our first capital was in New York City, in the New York Stock Exchange, right on Pearl Street, right where I live. Right on the corner of Pearl and Wall Street is a building that has no front door. It's just a gate. That is where the hidden hand is, right? Now, Belgium was used in those movies with Keanu Reeves, where he's a retired assassin, and he's one of the few people who gets out. But then his wife dies, and then things happen, and he has to go back in, right? And the Grand Hotel, right, is in New York City, and also the capital place of the hidden hand, or the high table, as they call it. Right? Hey, Jane. So it's right there. And the other thing was, when New York City went bankrupt in '72, it was the oil embargo. And basically, what happened was the United States went bankrupt. And the way that Nixon and Kissinger got out of that was they basically, created and finalized the ownership of the United States by the hidden hand, Hail Hydro. Right? And the front man of that, the poster child, is the Rothschild family. Right? So basically what Rothschild does is he takes all the gold out of America, and except for a little bit that they can move around and say, see, we got some gold. And why you drive around the country, and you will see incorporated village, incorporated city, incorporated town, incorporated state, incorporated country, is that we are a corporation. And our legislators, all the way from the U.S. president, all the way down to the dog catcher, is owned by this corporation. And they do exactly what they're told. You would wonder why all the police departments are the way they are. You should know better by now. Community policing really works. And in New York City, one day in 1971, they have 30,000 police. And then in 72, they go down to 8,000. So when you people call for defunding police, I gotta look at that. I was in a neighborhood in the Lower East Side where every week there were 5 murders. And when I say neighborhood, I'm saying like 6 blocks this way, 4 blocks that way. 5 murders, right? And all of the Lower East Side, there are probably 20, 30, 40 people killed every week. Right? Now, did anyone even talk about that? No. Well, I was living at the time. I came back from my stay with the old crone. My first one ended up when I was at Trinity. And came up, I was looking for a place to live. I went downtown with some friends, and all along both the East River and the Hudson River, and the Manhattan was where all of the New Amsterdam, all the docks were. It's still there, a good deal of them, not huge, right? Because things were turning to containerism, and all those offload things were in New Jersey, basically, and Queens and a few other places, but not really Manhattan. Passenger ships went to 34th Street and got off there on both sides, and that was about it. And so on the coast, the Hudson and the East Rivers, there were highways on either side, West Side Highway and the FDR. Thank you, Mr. Robert Moses, for destroying neighborhoods. He destroyed neighborhoods in Queens, Brooklyn, and Harlem by putting a BQE right through them and just slashing them up so they couldn't go across the highway. They didn't put bridges or anything. They wanted to, and then they redlined these areas. So no bank would lend them any money. So because most businesses rely on credit. Right? If you can't get credit, you can't. So all of mine, but that's why I would go from big gig to big gig. I never had a business. I had a career. I had I was well known for my skill sets. I'd be hired to do it, but I didn't live on those businesses. I would do a business, a job, make a nice little chunk of change, and then go travel the world for 2 years. Or live some other place, right? On the road. And that worked quite nicely. And of course, I was always totally. I learned how to be off the radar screen. I was trying to stay away from my direct work. And when I came back from being in school in Trinity, which most of the time I wasn't, and that didn't matter. Instead, I was. And that's why I learned the difference between matriculation and experience, between education and scholastic testing. Right now, why are the reading rates in America so low? Because no child left behind tests everyone to the point of worse than mediocrity. But they want to, 60s, 70s, 80s, early O's, people were rebelling against corporate state. And basically, this is what we're getting. Right? So, back in those days, when I came back from Ireland, I was looking for a place to stay. I was kind of couch surfing. And then the oil embargo happened. And I was working, and I got a couple of good gigs working for this company called Restaurants Associates. Would build. Hey, thank you. They had they had a lot of different kinds of restaurants. They had Windows on the World. They had a real fancy restaurant in the Walls of Astoria. They had a real fancy restaurant in Central Park, and a few other really fancy ones. And then they had corporate bars like O. Henry's and TGIF, and they were starting to think, Zoom zones, right? So I met this guy. I kind of knew him for a number of years, and then he basically became president, CEO, chairman of the board, and he started the restaurant Windows on the World, and it was beautiful, like something out of Hollywood, and it was different layers, so everyone could see the windows. There wasn't a bad seat in the restaurant, and the staircase kind of went up to these different mezzanines, right? And then top run, which were the VIPs. And at the end was his office, big glass office. And I'd watch everything going on, and you could see everything east and west of Hudson. You could see all the way out into the Atlantic Ocean, all the way up to Hudson, and over in New Jersey. And so he was putting, and they were like, McDonald's of German food. They had schnitzel and every kind of brat, and, potato, German potato, everything German. His grandma and mom were Germans. So he gave them a kitchen, and they made all the things, and they had a place in Queens to turn into food out at Sensie. So the food was basically catered to these restaurants, right? It wasn't made in Omaha, frozen, and so it was really pretty good. And I was tasked to build these things and then get them going, train a staff, and then move it on. And he kept putting one of his nephews or good friends to be the general manager. But I would build it, be the guy there for the first 4 or 5 weeks, up to 2 or 3 months, and get a staff that was really good. And then one thing I said, we need to have a really good cup of coffee. We need to have a little German breakfast bun, and we need to have an amazing cinnamon roll, right? And the best thing of German food is their baking. So Mom and Grandma went to task on that. He found a person who is a roaster in New York of coffee, and he started to get pre-roasted beans from them, and then put a roaster in every store. Um, and the main hood of the roaster went outside, so people walking on the street would smell this amazing coffee smell, and the place would smell really, but not overpowering. Roasters can be a little overpowering, just there, but not overpowering. But the smell, 90% of the smell went outside, so people would be drawn into the place. And he did the same thing with he put the cinnamon. We had electric ovens, and we had the bakery right on the window. And again, we had a big hood over the ovens and pumped that out into the street. And so we had a very, we started at 6 a.m. and we went till 9 p.m., right? And the first one was kind of near Grand Central. And then they built a Henry's Bar in Grand Central. And that became a thing. Every place that Zoom, or Henry was, we'd have another store, right? And it was doing really good, and I did that for a year. And so basically, I said, "Listen, I'm going to do this. I don't need to pay. What I really need is you need to give me like a credit card, right? So everything that I spend here in New York doing this, it's on your ticket. You can take it off on taxes. It's an expense, and I don't have. And then when I'm ready to go, you give me a nice little chunk of change, and I'll be on my merry way." And that was our little deal. But he really loved the way I did things, and I always, because I didn't have any other jobs. I just did this thing. I just constantly succeeded, constantly. It'll be open by this date. It won't be up and running by this date. It would, And so Pamela. So that was always my business model. Do my best. Always, supply what I say I'm going to do, right? Which most people don't do. They make an excuse. Never had an excuse. I just delivered on what I said I would do. And if I couldn't do it, I wouldn't say it. And I would say, well, we can do this, we can do that. I'd always give people opportunities and options. Anyway, so this guy was my butt more than my boss. He was my butt, and he really he could get anything he wanted. He was in the mix, as they say. So so the first place I did was downtown near Wall Street, right? Because they needed a Zoom Zooms, and they needed O. Henry's and a Zoom Zooms, right? So we put them both on this other street near the same street that J.P. Morgan was on. It was this little building, and we I mean, it wasn't that high. Although it's like all these buildings around it that it was in eternal darkness. But it was like almost left over from the Dutch. It was a really cute little building. So fit the German motif, and so the front was the Zoom Zones, and there were two. The big door into Zoom Zones. This other one that kind of, because there was a speakeasy in the back. And so I made the Henry's into a speakeasy, and the whole front that had been a bank into, Zoom Zones. And upstairs were 2 floors upstairs. And the top floor, somebody had a really nice Broccoli kind of apartment, and I took that over. And then the other was Zoom Zoom's New York City office. That was our what do you call it? Military sense, operational center, right? So I set it up like that, And we moved forward, and both were extraordinarily successful. Right? So I lived upstairs, and then one day he comes in and he says, "Wow, this is swank." And he goes, "I want to live. I need to take this over because it had its own 1920s elevator from the back. I could come in and go up privately to this place, right? So, he's the boss. He owns the building, So he gave me a bonus, for that. And I could kind of stay there, but it was no longer mine. It was his, right? And he had parties all the time there. And I had my own little bedroom, my own nice little teeny apartment, my own bathroom, my own little thing. And it was right off of where the elevator was. And so, but it was no longer my swank pad, no more my this. And so when I was in Asheville, right? Well, here's pictures of Asheville. So I was the dude in Asheville. So here's the pictures of the Vance Monument. And they took this down because they said it was misogynist. So why not take the Washington Monument down? And also, Mr. Vance was a Civil War general. So here is downtown Asheville, and this is in 1992. Right? And so this is right Pack Square. And right over here, this is where Pack Place was, right? And this was the Art Museum, the Science Museum, and right here was this old black theater, Chitlin Circuit Theater. And the black folk had ownership of it, and they had raised $1 million to redo it. And here's the fancy with all of the rich folk from the Paris of the South days, the Biltmore, the Astor's, all those guys were buried. And here's my apartment, which was right across the street from the. Thought you were talking New York City. Well, I went from New York City to Asheville, North Carolina, very quickly because Asheville, North Carolina, is almost New York City. I mean, there's a Broadway, there's a Lexington Avenue, there was a Wall Street. I mean, it was, the Astors and the Biltmores actually took New York City and put it in this mountains of North Carolina. Okay, so this is my beautiful little apartment that was right across from a really fancy Nazi hotel. And it's a big fancy Grove Park Inn. And the Grove family were these Nazis that had really fancy hotels all over the United States, especially the South. And here is my little street, right? And I don't know if you can see this, but I just bought a bunch of Christmas lights and decorated my own little street. And you could do anything you wanted. So here's me, and this is me in my late 40s. I was in my 40s and 50s when I lived in Asheville. But this is me in my late 40s. That's what I look like. Were you looking that good in your late 40s and your 50s? And here's part of my cadre. Now these guys, I miss people like this. So this guy, he came from a real poor family up in the Ozarks of Pennsylvania. People have no idea that they are. And he had a lot of issues, and he joined the Army, Navy, and he saw the world. And he, went on into the, got his college degree, and he was at the University of Asheville where I was doing research. And this guy was really, he had it in to be a writer. So he's writing, always writing. So I said, let me look at your stuff. No, I don't want anyone to look at my lemon. It was really good. So I convinced him he was a good writer. So I said, but you need to write plays. So we did. Started writing plays, and we started performing them. And so this is our buddy Haig, Alexander Haig, and his, grandfather or his uncle was the Al Haig of Ronald Reagan. And this guy was Pierce. Pierce was just a savant, brilliant, like you can't believe. And this is, oh, the art world, or the people who think they're the art world of Asheville in the 90s. And a guy named John Cram was just, he started this kind of crafts place on Wall Street. He's a good bud. He was really into films. The city of Roanoke gave him all of downtown, from Vance Park all the way up Broadway up to the hospital for $1, like 30 buildings for $1. And I helped him develop them. And this was an art gallery that I opened up on that street and got the art scene really happening. So there's me and Haig. And here's Vincent Moron. He's a guy who started Ticketron in New York City, and I knew him from there. And he waltzed into New York, into Asheville when it was, still when I did in '91, and he tried to buy up everything. And that's when I met a guy named Julian Price, who was heir to the Philip Morris fortune. And he said, you should buy up the most important historical and architectural buildings and keep them from guys like Moron. And so he did. He bought a public service building. He bought the Pack Square, which was going to be a gigantic office building, like as high as the Empire State Building. And it had 4 floors that were a commerce center, right? And like a shopping center. Before anybody had a shopping center, and so they have it now. I don't know if they call it the Asheville Mall, but now they call it some Pack Mall or something. And he bought up about 40 buildings, and in the public service building, he put every nonprofit in there, and he basically, the reason why Asheville is the way it is today is because Julian Price. No one knows his name, because what happened was he tried to save everything. The big newspapers there he bought up and tried to make them right, and environmentally he went after the paper companies for acid rain, and became his photographer and historian. He documented everything he did, and that's why I have all these pictures of Asheville. And I started doing little things in between, like when I saw Vincent Moran trying to take over, I started a thing called the Artist Trust, and the Chitlin Circuit, and now today this place called the Orange Peel in Asheville, Big Fancy. It was a big black nightclub. I broke into the place and just did shows there, but it wasn't owned by the city. It was owned by a lady who owned one of those car parts places. Anyway, somebody told somebody who told someone's lawyer who told her lawyer, and then her lawyer got a hold of me, and I said, hey, let me talk to that lady. And I talked to her, and I said, this is what I want to do. Oh, that's really great idea. Sure, you can. And so we, between her lawyer and me, and Julian, we kind of figured out how to let the Black people run it and have it be a nonprofit, and no one owned it, so it couldn't be taken over, blah, 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 blah. So we did. And it was very nice until I left. And then someone was the weakest link, and then the place was sold, and then it turned into what it is now. And pretty much that's what happened to Asheville. I left. It turned into what it is now. And I left in '98, and finally never went back. 99, just really never went back. When I would go to Florida, I'd stop and see a few friends, but that was about it. And I said, why'd you leave? I mean, man, you were the dude, da 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 da. And it was. I got a ton of stories about Asheville, and ton of photos of it. Just most amazing. I mean, this was above. This forest was above UNCA, right? And half of Asheville was a pharmacological safe line. This guy who, there are more cures for every cancer in the mountains above and around the Blue Ridge Mountains, around Asheville. And this guy, that's what UNCA, that was his university, right? And all of downtown Broadway, he had all these little cabins along the river there, not the French Port, but just the tributary that goes through town. And before the sewers, that's what the sewer was. Anyway, so all these amazing plants. And when I was there in the 90s, it was still all there. I mean, it was all still there, not anymore. Every square little centimeter of that place has been ripped apart and stuck a house on it. Oh, because it's so cool. And the highway, I-26 and I-40 go right through the city. 1 million cars drive through the city of Asheville every day. And it's in a valley. There is no air movement in that. So that, the lung cancer rate is off the chart. And the other thing that's truly amazing is the water. Why Asheville is what it is. That it got stuck in amber, right? And no one, no one knows that the drinking water of Asheville. I don't know if today maybe they might have fixed it, but I don't. I mean, what's going on in Kentucky is in Mississippi. The capital city of Mississippi is like. I mean, I was there in the 70s. I was part of this group that went around and realized that expansion was going to occur in the 80s. And so we went to all of these cities like Houston and Dallas and and we realized that the Southwest was where it was going to explode. We went in and said, don't build here, don't do this, don't do that, don't put a highway here. If you're going to do it, do this, make this sustainable. Nothing was made sustainable. Nothing was made so you could fix it. And they did. And like there was in Houston, there was a big floodplain, which you don't, just leave that as, it's a nice place to look at, a park. You do not build. And they did. They put 1 million houses there. And then back maybe 4 or 5 years ago, they had a big flood there. And with thousands of people died. They didn't tell people that, but it was pretty. And so what's going on in Kentucky, what's going on in Mississippi, and it's going to be all of America. There's this guy named the Sleeping Prophet, and in the 30s, Edgar Cayce, and he said, there's going to be a planetary change, COVID, and COVID just stands for the basically Devo. Remember, crack that whip, Devo. That's kind of where we're at. We're at the Devo-ness of the world, right? So, right now, just all these amazing things are happening right in front of our face. Starting with 9/11. In the last 20 years, it's just been a, Ferris wheel. Not even a Ferris wheel. What is that ride where they get in the cage and they spin you around and then they turn it upside down, sideways and say, "Whoa!" Right? That's the world we live in, and they're spinning it up so much they're trying to get everyone used to total chaos. China's going to take the Deep Six, so is Russia, and it's done there. Tummy, whatever. So, it's interesting times we live in, and what you need to do. So, back to New York City. So this little adventure, I should say, Back to the Future. So there I was, working for, Restaurants Associates. Living like a millionaire, but not having, I always, had this little card. Whatever I needed, forget. And I wanted to stay in a fancy hotel, not a problem. Wanted to do this, not a problem, right? And I would have, he would give me I went to see him every Friday up in, his palace on top of the World Trade Center, windows on the world. So, we drink, we smoke, we'd then go to his private table, have a nice meal. And the first thing he would do when I would come into his office, I'd sit in a nice comfy chair and he'd put an envelope on the desk and just wrote and pushed it towards me and had Benjamins. Never had any less than 5. Somebody had 20. When I did an excellent job that way, like I said, he would give me bonus one. So that was 72, and I at least had 5 Benjamins every week, sometimes 12. Plus, I was accruing my severance pay, right? So I remember, I was up there, and before I got this gig with him, I was just helping friends out and crashing on their couch. Some of my friends were artists, and here's a picture. Well, this actually is the 80s. But here's me. This is me in my 40s, and this is a building called Quando. It's a public school that was in a neighborhood that was redlined and just like totally collapsed, right? So we took it over, and we did art there, right? And I had my crew of youngsters, and this guy was a Japanese sushi chef. That's his wife there, and he would do these really amazing things with food, right? Deadly but amazing. And so this was our art gallery, our nightclub. This on the Lower East Side. It's called Quando. We also housed the Nuevo Rican poetry cafe there for a while. And it had no room for a gym. Well, it had a gym, but it had no room for a playground. So on the roof, they had this caged-in playground. So that was our roof thing. And so these guys were part of my concert. Right? So it's this kid. This guy, he's only 19 in this picture. And he was a street kid. He was going to be, he would have been dead if I hadn't grabbed him. So you're going to be my electrical helper. So, and this is when Basquiat was living with me. So he and Basquiat were a thing. And I just gave him the potential to express who and what he was instead of being an angry Irish guy who wanted to kill people. And here's another nice Italian boy. He's in the same really great painter, right? But he was just going to work in a pizza shop for the rest of his life, which wouldn't have been bad, But so that's what I do, and I'm doing that now, right? So the thing I did in New York, all the different stuff, I kind of did in Nashville. So here was we used to call it beer school, but every week we had a different motif. So this was our religious motif for this one. Right? Just see the dates and the times and the places. Right? I stumbled across this when I was cleaning up the bus, a big school bus when I traveled around to festivals and concerts, and was the itinerant reader advisor / electrician, right? So, people would, I worked for Bob and to Fillmore East, and I did, Woodstock was a great thing to put on your. I was a master electrician in that place. In the first one, meaning we first were going to put the concert on in Woodstock, right? And we only expected 20,000. We had a place over there, and the person who was the guy who funded it was Billy Graham, not the religious Billy Graham, but the nice Jewish boy who had the Fillmore East and Fillmore West and put a recording studio on both and made a fortune. All those movies, Almond Brothers live at the Fillmore East. The cover of that, right? Is all their tour boxes and cables and stuff. My boss one day he said, "Hey, go down to the stage and throw a bunch of stuff down on 6th Street because this lady, Annie Leibovitz, is going to start taking, she wants to do pictures of the Almond Brothers and she wants something. You're the artist, go down there." Anyway, so I did. I just kind of they were unloading their truck. I said, hey, put all of those ones with the Almond Brothers name on it. Put it there on the street. And I just took a pallet, pallet jack, just lifted it up, pushed it off the dock onto the floor, and everything went all over the place. And I moved things around a little bit. And I said, hey, Annie, how's that look? Get up on the deck and take a picture. And she's like, this is great. Click, 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 click. Did I get any, artistic? But she got to go. But by me doing that, became a pretty good friend of Annie Leibovitz. Little did I know that a few years later, my first wife would become her lead assistant and head darkroom tech of Rolling Stone. That was Donna Ann, my training wife. I had to go look her up, Donna Ann McAdams. Be nice to her now. So anyway, 40 minutes, 40 seconds. I love when that happens. So we are in the strangest of times, but we're always in the strangest times. There isn't it? I was over at my Ku Klux Klan Southern Baptist Church, and I go for the Bible studies, right? And the head guy, he loves it when I go there because he has all these people who are deacons who think they know the Bible. He's going to sit there and they say something, and as soon as they go, say I have a question, I kind of raise my hand. So, ma'am, is that the Bible there you're reading?
Pardon?
Is that the Bible?
No.
What are you reading?
Senator Brown.
What's that?
Just a
Novel?
novel.
No.
Yeah,
So you're a novel reader.
I am. I read a lot.
Well, me too. I read this book.
Read that one too.
Yeah. And the problem with this book is most people don't even read it. They just quote it. Right? So they have no context, right? And
None
then
whatsoever.
and then the other real problem they have is that even if they do read it, they don't live it.
Like the preacher's talking about.
Yeah. So I just came. I don't stick around for the churchy service. I just go to the Bible teaching part of it. And the guy who runs the place, he loves it when I go there. And I don't say anything because I already got the set people to just say back to the guy who's teaching what he wants to hear. But he does say, does anyone have anything to say? Like every time they go from thing to thing. And I don't even raise my hand. I just start talking. And it's, all the people who think they know what they're talking about kind of do this. And my the head guy just chuckles because he can't say the stuff he wants to say, but that's why I'm there.
Well, with me in Sunday school,
Yep.
I just like to listen because for 20-some years I taught the 3 and 4-year-olds, and I said, listen,
Where did you
it's
teach?
not the same.
Where did you teach?
Hampton Baptist.
Yes, the little ones are they're much better than the anybody over 20 is like forget about it.
Well, with little ones, I said,
Well, they the thing about little ones is that they know when you're handing them a bunch of bull.
hard to fool.
Exactly, hard to fool.
Have a good day.
Yep. So, anyway, so as I'm sitting out there in the beauty of God's country, as my dad would say, I am. It's 98% of the time it's beautiful. I don't hear anything. Get the crickets and the squirrels and this and that. And but the rich have come in and bought up everything. And the real rich have started to bulldoze everything that's around the lake, right? The more valuable, expensive stuff, right? They're like staging it, and it's all image, no substance. They built this gated community with 120 lots on top of a mountain, and it's like this. So they have all these lots on a thing this steep, right? So They don't build a house. They just sell the lots, right? There is no septic. There is no water. There is no electricity. There is a kind of road that goes up, and they just took all the trees away, put down stone, and down to the bottom where the end of the lake is, where the mud pit is, they have stuck a marina. So everybody who buys a house gets a slip for their boat, right? And they put all the effort into the marina. Looks very nice, and then right, so people buy that and look at it, and the view from there, you don't get to see the lake. The lake is a beautiful lake, but because of that end, it kind of curls around like a colon, and it's just right where the anal port would be in your body. That's where this gated community is. They should call it, instead of Eagle's Nest or whatever they call it. I don't think that's the name of it. They should call it, Rosy Hole. So anyway, so that's what the really rich are doing, and they're basically laundering money. They probably dumped $10 million into that, and like I said, there is no drinking water, there is no septic, and there is no electricity. And so you're going to have to put that in, right? So if you're at the top, you'll have the hardest to get water up there. But if you put your septic tank here, the guy whose house down there, when it really rains hard, and it's a rainforest, the sewage will be in their basement, right? And the next one, and the next one. And so that's, 3 ridges away from me. So I don't know. But they bought up all the land around us, and the last of the holler folk are dying a miserable death. And I see this all going on, and I see, the wreckage of it, and it is out. And this is rural you can get in America, unless you're not in the middle of the desert somewhere and being a Native American. Native American. So I just watch this go on, and being an empathetic person, it's hard for me to, and I don't get angry. I try to help, and there is no helping because so I go to this church, and because the head guys, and he's, all the head guys who are old timers who've been there their whole lives, and they know what's going on, even though they are the head of the school system, or head of the hospital, or head of the churches. They do their best to try and make a difference, but they have me there to try and step in where they can't, and say things when they can't, and they let me do that, and so that's the best I can do at the moment. And at some point, someone will buy me out, and I'll be on the road again. But at this age, it's one thing to do it when you're in your teens, and your 20s, and your 30s, and your 40s, and your 50s, even in your 60s, I was doing that. Your 70s, and when you've already died a couple of times, and one little slip this way or that way, it's like, uh-oh. But we had a troll on. His name is Yo-Yo, and he's been on forever, since the beginning. And I kind of, in the beginning there were lots of trolls, and I reached out to them and tried to help them, and they were an important part of the cadre, still are, and they basically changed themselves in a big way. But unless you can really, and this is the bottom line of the show today, your life is not about you. It's about the we and me. That's where it's at. That's where we're going. Especially with time. So what's dinner? What's up for dinner?
Well, we got chicken and dumplings.
The usual.
Yep.
Anything else?
That's about it
That's
for the special. Yep.
I think I took enough of my caloric intent for today.
Okay.
Right. I had pancakes, eggs, sausage, and then I waited about 20 minutes and had the full Monty omelet. Quite yummy. I normally just get the vegetarian. So Here's a good one. Ah,
Person couldn't identify the lights. He wondered if they were
Take binoculars to better examine the animal. It is
possibilities of devastating aerial attacks on the U.S.
This doesn't sound like a guy on a scientific mission.
It sure doesn't.
Admiral Byrd.
Byrd warned that it was imperative for the United States to take immediate defensive measures against hostile forces in the Arctic and Antarctic. The admiral went on to say that he wasn't trying to alarm anyone.
Too late.
But the cruel reality is that in case of a new war, the United States could be attacked by flying objects that had the ability to move from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Admiral Byrd reiterated this in a few different statements. He warned that there was a new enemy that could attack any country at any time, anywhere, no matter the distance. When Admiral Byrd got back to Washington, he was immediately debriefed. And though he had just spent 2 weeks making statements in the press, after a lengthy interrogation, Admiral Byrd never uttered another word about Operation High Jump. The mission was immediately classified top secret, and any sailor who spoke about the mission would be arrested and imprisoned. The Navy then published a brief summary of the mission's achievements and admitted some sailors were killed, but they didn't say how many. And officially, all the deaths were accidents, and the bodies were buried there, not brought home. During one of his flights, Admiral Byrd was missing for 3 hours in an episode of lost time, but that was officially blamed on radio failure. The official reason for terminating the mission early was poor weather conditions, and that was that. However, you know how Admiral Byrd was missing for 3 hours and experienced lost time? Well, Byrd was meticulous at documenting everything. But when he returned to the States, his journals were confiscated and classified. But the government didn't get everything. He had a secret diary that he gave to his son right before he died. And if any of what he claims to have seen is true, well, it changes everything.
The secret diary.
According to Admiral Byrd's diary, he fuels up for a flight early in the morning. The weather is clear, and mechanically, the plane checks out. At 8:15, at an altitude of 2,300 feet, he checks in.
08:15 hours. Radio check with base camp. Situation normal.
At 10 after 9, he notices a color pattern in the snow. Nothing extreme, but he circles the area to get a closer look. He makes visual contact with camp and radios in his findings. Then his instruments start to act strange. He writes that both his compasses are gyrating so much that he can't even use them. So he uses the sun to navigate and maintains a visual of camp. He reports that his controls are feeling sluggish. He's concerned about the wings icing up. There's a little ice, but no indication of a problem, so detecting something down there? Or is this disinformation deliberately leaked to the Soviets by U.S. intelligence? I don't know. I've debunked as much as I can for you. Even though a lot of the story is false, not all of it is. And it seems as the only way we'll get answers is to go to Antarctica. But if there's one thing that every government in the world agrees on, it's that whatever is down there needs to stay there. But I'll leave you with these final thoughts. Just a few months after Operation High Jump, a UFO allegedly crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. The location of the crash is only a few miles from the world's first nuclear explosion. And Admiral Byrd did go missing for 3 hours and arrived back at camp 3 hours late. He was in a small, short-range airplane, so why didn't he run out of fuel? Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. My name is AJ, that's Hecklefish. This has been the Y-Files. If you had fun or learned anything, do me a favor, like, subscribe, comment, share. All that stuff really helps a small channel. The algorithm is cruel to us, but with your help, I think we can defeat it. Until next time, be safe, be kind, and know that you are appreciated.
Let's talk about better help. If you ever feel anxious, depressed, stressed, Overwhelmed by the world being very much on fire, BetterHelp can step in with their fleet of licensed therapists who are trained to listen and help you. 2 years ago, when the lockdown started, I think that a lot of us started feeling like I could really use some help. I did actually reach out to BetterHelp. I got paired up with a really great therapist in, I think, Montana in the United States, and we actually had a lot in common. It really helped me figure out a lot of things about myself, and it was really good to have someone to talk to on a weekly basis, but also whenever I did have like a bad moment, I was able to send her a little message. It just worked great, and I would really recommend it to anybody. There are over 20,000 therapists in BetterHelp's network, and you will get your match within 48 hours after you fill in your mental health questionnaire. After this, you can schedule sessions with your therapist.
Sorry about that. But I guess you get the idea. So, you've been here for almost an hour. Let's see. 55 minutes and 55 seconds. I love it when that happens. So, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Don't believe anything I say. Send something to your PayPal. Thank you for a few folks who sent me something. And let's see if our friend is around. Screw it. I'm just going to go. So, you guys stay well. Be good. I love you all. I virtually have no cash. Send something to PayPal. I have like that much gas. I just took a shot to see if I could get here, get some gas, have breakfast. It's going to be interesting to see if my card works for breakfast. But these people know me. They trust me, I think, for a few dollars. Okay. Catch you later.